people perpetuating this idea right now in marketing of the do more with less era. And sure, our budgets in marketing are being cut, budgets in sales are being cut, budgets in HR are being cut. We need to be in a profitable, efficient growth era as a business. And the real challenge with the do more with less era is that we had a bunch and we weren't getting very much out of it in 2023 and into 2024. Whether you're looking at the entire go-to-market or inside of marketing, it has to be not my budget's going down, but how do I make the budget that I have work against the goals that I have? If my target is to deliver a 2-year CAC payback on go-to-market, which means about 40% of that will come from marketing, a 10-month CAC payback on marketing expenditures. If that's the thing that I need to figure out how to do, I need to figure out how to deploy my budget to get there against the core unit economics. We're going to give everyone a second, but I got a good topic to talk through today. I think will be really relevant to what people are going through. And then a little housekeeping before that. I'm going to be in Boston next week and then going to Italy after that. So for the next 2 weeks after this one, we will not have this event. We can't control it on your calendars. And some people, so just make sure that you clear that from your calendar for Tuesday, the 25th, and then July 2nd, we won't have this event, and we'll get back going on Tuesday, July 9th. It's just a little housekeeping there. What I want to get started with and talk about today was the thing from May 13th, 2024. I'm not exactly sure when it was exactly published, but the 2024 Gartner CMO Survey has been something that's been being shared around in the B2B community. I'm going to highlight a little bit about what's happening and my take on some of it. I've tried to push this in the past. I'm going to use this as an example to push it even harder. As an executive or as whoever, when you look at benchmarks and data, you need to go way deeper and understand, is this stuff relevant to me? Is the sample size similar? Is the sample and demographics similar to me? How was the data actually collected? Would I be able to replicate this by looking at my data and be able to replicate it so I can compare apples to apples? And so let's just read through a headline here from Gartner.com. Gartner CMO Survey reveals marketing budgets have dropped to 7.7% of overall company revenue in 2024. Their spend survey reveals 2024 average budgets have fallen by 15% as CMOs pursue growth in the era of less. So those are the headlines. I'm going to just read a little bit of this prose because I think this context is important. It just notes average marketing budgets have fallen 7.7% of total company revenue, down from 9.1% in 2023, according to Gartner, a survey of 395 CMOs and marketing leaders. The survey was conducted in February through March 2024. Respondents were CMOs and marketing leaders in North America and Northern and Western Europe across 10 different industries, company sizes, and revenues, with the vast majority of respondents reporting median annual revenue of over $5.3 billion. So first off, you saw the median annual revenue, $5.3 billion. So if you are a middle market CMO, you are the CMO of a $100 million company or early stage, you have a 3-person marketing team at your 10 million ARR company. This data is wildly inaccurate to you. Your CFO might be coming over and saying, hey, CMOs are seeing their budgets fall from 9 point whatever percent to 7.7%. When we reforecast for H2, we think that we should cut the marketing budget for this exact reason. And you need to be able to explain to them, hey, this sample is for companies of this size. It's not applicable to our situation. So one is the sample size and demographic. A lot of the benchmarks that you see out there, especially from Gartner and Forrester, are super enterprise customers, billions of dollars in revenue, and likely not translatable or actionable in a middle market or early stage company. Other benchmarks you'll see mix everything together. So you have, CAC payback periods of companies that are 500K ARR being mixed with the CAC payback period of a publicly traded SaaS company, and then averaging them together, which has basically no value. It actually makes the metric really not valuable from my perspective. So the sample and the demographic really matter. Number two, It is not clear, and I'm not a customer of Gartner. I didn't download the report, so I'm sure if you looked into it, you'd get more clarity on this. But from this, it's not clear, and most people that aren't a customer are just going to be able to read these headlines. It is not clear. Are these B2C companies? Are they B2B companies? Or are they both? Is it mixed together? That is not clear in this. As I go down, I'll start to make my interpretation of it without having it. But the way a B2C company budgets in terms of how much they spend on agencies, how much they spend on labor, and how much they spend on MarTech is wildly different than a B2B company. And you need to know that, and you need to know whether the sample is mixing them together or whether it's one or the other. A B2B company should not be budgeting for marketing like a B2C company does. The next thing to think about is, are these business models reoccurring purchase models or recurring business models? You should be budgeting for marketing very different when you're Coca-Cola versus when you're Salesforce. Very different. Coca-Cola, you need to spend money to remind the customer to buy every single time. In Salesforce, you need to get the customer, and then they're in a 3-year contract with you most likely. And then you have customer success and account management and all these other investments and resources outside of marketing to continue to get that customer to buy over time. That's another different dynamic. Lastly, and I'm going to put, I've said this a couple of times, but I'm going to put it on the record even further based on this survey. Your marketing budget as a percent of overall revenue is a fucking terrible way to benchmark your revenue and to make a decision on how much you spend on marketing. A terrible way. It does not include how fast are you growing. You should be spending way differently on marketing if you're growing at 50% versus 7%. It doesn't include that. It doesn't include your gross margin. You should be spending differently on marketing if you have 85% gross margin versus 40% gross margin. It doesn't include your EBITDA and profitability. You should be spending very differently if you're 30%, if your target is 30% EBITDA versus negative 5% EBITDA. It doesn't include your current performance. If your CAC payback is 48 months or 7 months, it doesn't include any of these things. So benchmarking against percent of overall revenue, I just think is a very flawed way to look at how to budget for sales and marketing. It also doesn't include, you'd budget for marketing very differently depending on how much you spend on sales and how much you spend on account management and things like that. If you're looking for a benchmark as a percentage of revenue, it should be total go-to-market spend, not just marketing spend. When you break that down a little bit further, here's what we have. And I'm just going to compare this because now, you see that sample, right? For a marketing leader that didn't really think about all those different dynamics would then look at the next part of the study, which is the resource mix of how this marketing budget is spent between marketing technology, labor, paid media, and agencies. Those are the 4 categories. In the 2024 data, this report says that companies spend more on marketing technology than they do on people, which we have never seen in our analysis of financial data at Paceto across 50 companies. Not even close. Marketing technology is an insignificant expenditure relative to people and programs in every single analysis that we've done. Yet in this data, it's showing that companies are spending more on technology than they do on people, which is one of the reasons why I think this survey is from B2C companies, because B2C companies spend a lot more on agencies and a lot less on internal people, typically. It also shows that companies spend 22% of the total marketing budget on agencies, which we never see in a B2B setting. And so that's just a little bit of a breakdown. I encourage you all to take a look at this, but I saw this get shared at LinkedIn a bunch of times. And it's like people perpetuating this idea right now in marketing of the do more with less era. And sure, budgets in marketing are being cut. Budgets in sales are being cut. Budgets in HR are being cut. We're not in the do more marketing with less era. We're in we need to be in a profitable, efficient growth era as a business. And the real challenge with the do more with less era is that we had a bunch and we weren't getting very much out of it in 2023 and into 2024. And it has to be, whether you're looking at the entire go-to-market or inside of marketing, it has to be not my budget's going down, but how do I make the budget that I have work against the goals that I have? If my target is to deliver a 2-year CAC payback on go-to-market, which means about, 40% of that will come from marketing, a 10-month CAC payback on marketing expenditures. If that's the thing that I need to figure out how to do, I need to figure out how to deploy my budget to get there against the core unit economics. Before, it was hit the goal or else. And at that point, it like the complaint would be, I don't have enough budget to grow at 100% next year. Or I don't have enough budget for my $100 million company to grow 50% next year. That was the right objection in 2021 or 2022. But against the business goals today, which is deliver profitable, efficient growth, the complaint is not I need more budget. It's I need to make the budget that I have work at the level that it needs to work. It's just a different game right now. So I'm encouraging people not to stop complaining about I don't have enough budget and map that against your CAC payback period and show yourself that you should be able to hit your target with the budget that you already have. That's a little bit on the CMO survey. That's a word of caution for some people that might look at that, or another executive at a company that might try to bring that into your market, your CMO of a $100 million company, and the CFO is coming over to bring you that as a reason to think about budgeting off a percentage of revenue or think about lowering your budget and being able to push back on those things based on what I just told you. There's a lot of people that will just read the headline and not look into the details or not have the domain expertise to look into the details and understand that. And then additionally, as I talk about CFOs, I've been spending a lot of time with CFOs recently, and it's been a real learning opportunity for me. Historically in my career, mostly working with CMOs and then sometimes chief revenue officers. And then as the Paceto has continued to evolve and grow, like a lot of times we're working with CFO, CEO, chief revenue officer. It's been really interesting for me to hear from CFOs their thoughts on the go-to-market and marketing. And so I want to share this with you transparently, some of the trends that I'm hearing, anecdotes of what CFOs think. A lot of CFOs do not trust the reports and data that come from marketing. A lot of CFOs get an ask from a CMO that says, I want $3 million more in budget with no financial justification of what that extra $3 million is going to return. So they deny that request. A lot of CFOs are starting to recognize that actually creating pipeline is the biggest issue in their business, and they're seeing that the average rep performance and calculate how much revenue you need to grow and hire that many reps. They're seeing that model break down. And they realize that we need to create pipeline and then have an appropriate amount of reps to support the pipeline that we can create, which is something that I've been talking about since like 2018, 19. But really, it took this decline in the economy for people to really start to see some of the things I've been pointing out for a long time. I'm seeing CFOs really that realize that they need to understand marketing data and marketing metrics better because they realize it's a big hole in their company. And so I think that having that acknowledgement as a marketing leader, thinking about the connection that you have between marketing and finance, I see strong CMOs that have great business acumen that are able to make this connection. And they typically are some of the highest performing CMOs from my perspective. And so being able to recognize where do you fall in that camp as a marketing leader and what can you do to start to close the gap, to operate more effectively, to build more trust with the CFO, not go to coffee. Like, sure, you can go to coffee, but you actually build more trust with having hard skills relating to what those people care about, delivering reports that make sense to them, that matter to them, that speak at the altitude that they're looking at. I think those are some actionable takeaways to be able to collaborate and work more effectively and build more trust between marketing and finance. So those are some anecdotes. I'm going to continue to share some of that. I've noted that I see this disconnect between marketing and finance. And I noted that maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago on the podcast. I'm spending more time digging in, and now the sample size is getting larger and you're starting to really see the pattern here. So I'm excited about the opportunities that this creates. When there's an issue like this, it creates career-changing opportunity from my perspective. And so I'm sharing that stuff as an awareness that this is an early thing, that a clear pattern that's happening that create opportunities for either you on live or listening to the podcast. So happy to talk about, maybe budgeting becomes a big talk of this conversation based on the spend survey. So happy to cover that, or benchmarking or any other direction. So thanks y'all for being here. Happy to talk through it with you. Thank you.
All right. We got some good comments in the chat. One thing that Donna pointed out that I think is good to acknowledge and maybe get your comments on, Chris, is that finance teams have different definitions between, what is the program spend and working versus non-working dollars, and even how they allocate headcount, and is agency a part of headcount. So there's really no standardization when you're looking at large scale. And then on the Gartner study as well, it's all survey based. So when you say, headcount or when you say programs, it really depends on the person's definition of what they think that is and how they're self-reporting that data into the survey. So that came up in the chat a lot. So I thought that could be a point you could hit on.
Yeah, I mean, almost all benchmarks created today, even the ones that are more narrow inside of B2B or inside of B2B go-to-market, are all survey-based. So you ask a question to somebody, and then they just type in an answer. They might guess. They might not pull out their entire P&L from the trailing 12 months and look at exactly the expenses and categorize them in the exact same way that you want. And therefore, the data that they put in is probably inaccurate. Some surveys are like, how much do you spend on brand? With no definition of brand. Every single one, if you ask what brand means and what brand expense, every single person on this call would have a different definition. Nobody has clearly defined that. If you gave them 100 expenses and say, tell me which expenses are to brand, 0 people would have the same answer. And so there's a real flaw in the benchmarks created today from surveys. It's easy for tech vendors to send out a survey monkey, get 500 responses, put it in a PDF research report, market it as a gated PDF, and call them benchmarks. That's where most of the benchmarks come from today. We have to be very cautious around the actual accuracy and validity of those, especially when they come from self-reported surveys, and especially when they include financial data like budgets, CAC payback periods, and things like that. David Spitz has done some great work paving the way using publicly reported data of public SaaS companies. That, to me, that's about as accurate as it can get, because all those financials are required to be reported by the SEC. But when you get into private companies, then you're in surveys not validated, self-reported data. There's cause for concern when you get out of the space of public companies when it comes to benchmarking. The survey method is a great way to get benchmarks around what people think, not against quantitative hard data. So surveys that say, is your budget going down or not? And CMOs saying their budgets are declining, that's what a survey should be used for. But when we try to get to the level of the budgets are going down from 9.1% to 7.7% based on a survey is just not the appropriate way to get to that level of quantitative accuracy. I think there was another point. You mentioned surveys and then something before that. You want me to touch on that as well?
Yeah, basically, the way companies categorize things internally. And we see this at Paceto a lot when we do our internal analysis and kind of benchmark them against our database. But, headcount, is that full in headcount? Is that just salary? Does that include XYZ, right? There's a lot of different definitions, and even program spend. Sometimes program spend includes agency and contractor for some companies. Some companies, they segment that out, put it under headcount, right? There's all these nuances. So again, that's, I think, a big factor here that Donna was calling out.
Totally, yeah. That would impact how things are reported on surveys specifically, but also something where it calls for having a commonly accepted language. Like there are GAAP accounting principles that govern how a profit and loss statement works and how a balance sheet works. I think we need some of that stuff in place before we start trying to do benchmarking. It's easy to create public company financial benchmarks. Every single company knows how to report. There are standards for it. And then it's easy to look at that data that's standardized and reported and be able to create benchmarks and averages and things like that off of it. We just don't have that initial infrastructure. Even if you look at the public company data, some companies will include customer success in gross margin. Other companies will include customer success in sales and marketing expenditures. And even in public companies, there are discrepancies around that at the top level, at the highest level. And so then when you even break that down into, do SDRs go into marketing or into sales, or do they have their own? And every company will treat that differently. Is Salesforce as a technology spend blended across the whole go-to-market? Is it a sales expense? And there are so many nuances that require some level of a commonly accepted set of definitions, which we're working on at Paceto. And I think that we've done the most work in this area. So I think we've seen the most different types of how people are categorizing and where the common hiccups are. Agencies, like agency spend, some people will put that as a program cost. The core agency spend, what are you doing when you buy an agency? You are spending money to buy people, maybe people and a process those people run. That is a headcount expenditure that's non-W2. Now, the media dollars that agency spends for you is a program expense. So I think that there are a lot of nuances that need to be defined. We have a clear perspective and are continuing to work on that at Paceto.
Definitely. I'm going to come back to the Gartner survey, and I actually have the whole thing pulled up, so I can make
Sweet.
sure if we want. But you were correct, Chris, without even seeing this. Is 43% sample of B2B, 21% sample of B2C. So definitely mixed there. And your point previously on definitions, I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen. So this is looking at spend broken out by B2B versus B2C and then blended together. And it shows you the sample size and the median here. The other thing here that we just touched on is the paid media budget across journey allocations. So what does paid media mean for brand awareness, consideration, conversion to sale, and loyalty for advocacy?
And then it's just perhaps, because if you look at the net B2B and net B2C, the numbers are pretty similar when you think about like the differences between agency being net B2, that B2B spends more on agencies and services than B2C and marketing. Like anything below $1 billion ARR, I've never seen anything like that. More than 20% of total marketing budget going to external headcount. It's nowhere close to that. And so it could be a bias in the sample. Like maybe 5, 10, $20 billion companies do spend 20% of marketing budget on agencies and services. But that is not how it works at all in the middle market or early stage. Maybe an early stage where they have 3 people, but we've never seen anything like that in the middle market. What do you think, Sydney? It's 10% of headcount, maybe, on agencies, and then headcount is like 40% of total. So that's 4%.
Yeah.
Normal, 8 to 8% on agencies and services that we see compared to the 22, 23% benchmark here.
Yeah, we look at headcount total, which includes agencies and consultants. And then we break out, what is the mix between FTE, full-time employees versus, agency consultants and contractors. And typically what we see is of the total headcount spend, anywhere from like 5 to 8% is usually what the average is that is currently spending in their budget right now on agencies and services. And that's in the mid-market space, like private company. So very specific niche there.
And then on the labor line item you see here, you see on the B2B, 24.3% of the marketing budget spent on labor, which we'll look at as headcount. Like we'll typically see 40 to 50% on that line item, not 24%. And then when you look at marketing technology, depending on how it's defined, like we typically see less than 2 or 3%. And Gartner's over here saying 25% for B2B. And so I'm starting to come to the conclusion that the sample that Gartner is measuring of companies that have a median of 5.3 billion in revenue and may not be software companies. So you have enterprise companies that sell B2B, like GE Healthcare could be in here. And that company will spend their marketing budget very differently than a $100 million software company. It's very odd to me that the B2B and the B2C spend benchmarks are so similar. Spend should be allocated pretty differently.
Yeah, we typically see anywhere from 40 to 50%. Some companies are heavily over that on headcount, but that's like the median of what we see from our customers. Yeah, so just interesting. I just want to pull this up for visual for anybody watching later on YouTube or the live audience. It kind of helps to actually have some hard numbers to look at. Then you can go kind of fill this out. The mix of advertising was interesting as well. Mm-hmm. We see, this graphic here just is showing paid media, search advertising, social advertising, and display advertising. And what is the investment allocation? And we see search advertising much higher in the mid-market private SaaS space that we work in. They're reporting here it's 14%, and social advertising is 12%.
Yeah, so almost a 1-to-1, the same amount of spend going on social as search, almost the same amount going on search as is going on social, as is going on display, which is nowhere close to what we typically see. Typically, 70-80% of the media budget will go to search in a B2B SaaS company that we'll analyze. It kind of like, Sydney, it kind of paves the way of like, maybe we should like be publishing something like this for our, like the space that we play in, because as we've gone through this in more and more detail, I think that this is like the opposite of helpful for the types of people that listen to this podcast. I think it's actually going to lead you in the wrong direction.
probably not right for your audience if you're listening to this podcast or on this event.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was super helpful for people to be able to see, and for me.
Some good comments in the chat. John said this conversation is super helpful. Really loved this discussion. Thanks, John, for that feedback. And he wants to come on and ask a question. So I'm going to go to John, and Donna will come back to you.
Chris and the crew, I always enjoy this when I get to dial into it. So I work at a global marketing company, a global technology company. We do marketing, B2B marketing. Chris, your company has actually helped us with some of our original setup of things. And we've been running stuff for about, I've been here for a year and a half. And we've been running stuff for about 13, 14 months. And we've got a lot of really good metrics lately. Like the metrics are like, we're destroying metrics that we had like a month ago. And it feels good. At the same time, I've got like a senior leadership that's like, awesome. Those metrics are great. Those are like better than marketing metrics I've seen like from any company I've worked at. And they're like, but also like, hey, where's the closed won deals, right? And I'm like, oh, I get it. I have the same thought. Like, where are the closed won deals? We don't have any that have trickled all the way through the system. And I know each company's kind of different and each system's different, each product. How do you deal with that when you get the executive that's like, hey, why didn't I snap my fingers and like a deal happened immediately when I spent marketing money? You're like, it takes time, there's lead time, all that. What's the context in which you communicate that helps to get them on board with waiting for stuff to percolate naturally, like marketing sometimes has to do?
Like, what metrics are you blowing it out of the water on?
So we've got stuff like visits to the website, visit to high intent pages are up, like in some cases, like 1,000% from they were like last year at this time. We've got people on the demo request page. We've got people submitting the demo request as a result of marketing. Sometimes they're submitting those as a result of non-paid marketing, like our dark social and stuff like that. But we're tracking all the way through to close won deals, and having this company's really never done marketing before until like a year and a half ago. They're like a global leader, didn't really have to do that. People just came to them. So now they're like, we're spending money on marketing for the first time. When do we see like the triple digits happen? And you're like, yeah, it takes time. Give me, be patient with me.
What's like the average sales cycle in the business?
It's like between like 3 and 6 months. Some of that seems to be dependent upon the responsiveness of our sales crew. Sometimes it's like, hey, they take a while to get to it. We're trying to increase, to reduce that with like schedule, putting a scheduler on there so that the meeting's on the books when somebody requests a demo. But yeah, it can take a while sometimes for some of our deals to go through. So some stuff that like we're getting this high metrics now, it might be 6 months before that stuff starts to turn into concrete dollar signs that I can directly prove we're tied. We're already doing concrete dollar signs. I just can't prove it all. And that's where they're like, prove it.
Yeah.
I love the metrics. When do we get to the money town?
Was the company getting revenue from like a demo request or from the website before they were investing in marketing? Like, you guys still had a website. Yeah. People were still, if you're a global company, people were still filling that out and becoming a customer,
we get that. We don't have to. I mean, it's been kind of nice for me to be somewhere where like we're like, hey, look, we're going to drop a webinar, and it's like, oh, 500 people want to join like immediately without us having to spend a dime. We have a lot of built-in equity, and because of the leadership in our niche, but at the same time, we would also like to expand that into some spaces where we don't have 98% market share. Where like, oh, enterprise, we don't have a lot of that. We destroy the category. How do we build revenue though without, there's not any more money in the category. We've already got it all.
Yeah. So have you ever looked at quarter over quarter trends over like 6 or 8 quarters around how much stage 2 or stage 3 pipeline is coming from people that submit that request on the website?
Yes, I have been doing some of that math. I did that math at, I'm 1 year in there. So like at the 1 year mark, January, we did a little math, and they were like, this is the best metric, analysis I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, thank you. But yeah, I just guess I know how to use, Google Tag or Google Looker Studio. And like, I have some ability to put metrics together. So I do have some of that, although for the paid marketing, I only have two quarters of that. For the non-paid marketing, I can go back, in Salesforce, I can go back a decade if I want to.
Yeah.
And try to look at trends. Some of it's like, hey, in this market, this is, the US market's shrinking. This market's getting bigger. Overall, we're growing, but slower than we want to. I know that's kind of not direct to your question. But
so just a hypothesis, I don't know for sure, but especially with large companies, I see this mistake a lot where they slice the analytics in so many different small slices that they lose sight of the bigger picture. So like they're looking at, okay, I want to look at the impact of paid marketing with UTMs in Ireland, and then I want to look at it without UTMs in England, and I'm over here in this region and over here in this and this and this and this. And you slice it down so little that you don't even see any meaningful trends. And so, but when you bring it all back together at a global level, you take out the segmentation, you take out whether it came from paid or anything, and just look at how much pipeline do we create from the website globally? How much did we do in Q2 versus Q1 versus Q4 versus Q3? What is the trend on that? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it like very volatile? And when
now we got 3-to-1 return on ad spend if you take out the salaries of our employees. So like just like money we spend on marketing, we tend to return 3 times that back. But I can't prove it all with the paid marketing yet. It's like, oh, that's a combined high level, like you said, trend of everything together. And they're like, do we need to spend money on marketing? Maybe we should turn that down. It seems like we got it just fine as always, like we used to.
When you say,
I'm like, let's not turn off the spigot. Let's keep some money going,
When you say a 3-to-1 return on marketing spend, you clarified what the spend was, but how do you determine what the return is?
So it's based on some methods you guys gave us in terms of like Pipe Hero. So it's only a certain type of deal that we can put some sort of Salesforce linked contention of marketing influenced. So something that we touched pretty recently, and we can kind of prove that with some nuanced ways. So it's directly like you guys basically were like, here's how you should do it. And we're like, awesome, let's do it that way. So we've got like 10 high level metrics we look at. It is trending up. What I don't have a proof on is trending up from the direct spent money on LinkedIn and Google and saw that turn into dollars. Prove it with, concrete science. I don't have that yet. It hasn't been all moving through the system long enough and large enough.
Let me use that as this is a learning opportunity for everybody. So it was 3-to-1 on marketing programs excluding headcount against return. You said the word return, which is why I asked that question. Now you'll hear from someone else, because then you said, okay, but it has to be influenced by a channel and it only comes from this. And when people say I get a 3-to-1 return, they might only look at the digital advertising spend, not the total marketing spend. They might only look at website revenue or whether it was influence. And so when you hear 2 people say I get 10-to-1 and they get 3-to-1, it's truly not clear whether the 10-to-1 is actually better because there's no clarity on how either one is calculated. That's just a learning opportunity for everybody there, because somebody else telling you their metric without being clear about how that's calculated and whether you can calculate it back. It's kind of just like throwing a number in thin air. I'm not taking a knock on you. I'm just using it as a learning opportunity for everyone.
No, I don't disagree. That's part of what we're doing as a team is like, hey, you count it this way. You want to count it this way. Sales was like, well, actually, we kind of halfway knew that person a little bit. That's not marketing. That's not sales. And I'm like, let's not compete on that way. I don't, we do need to measure it, but also at the same time, like you can't count it because 5 years ago, I talked to that guy once and then marketing influenced it and put him back in the pipeline. So it's a sales lead, not a marketing lead. And you're like, ugh. We got a little bit of that. We have to just communicate with our team and educate people on, and that's sort of even just how to talk about it. That what you just gave as a response was helpful.
So here's a couple of new ways for you to consider. Okay, to elevate it, you were spending and then you started spending on like additional marketing investments. So people are saying like, should we keep spending or not? We look at 2 trending quarterly metrics, and I'll just simplify because it can get really complicated. You have total marketing spend, and then you have total whatever you define as qualified pipeline created, and you create a ratio, and it'll say for every $1 we spend on marketing, we get $8 back in Q2, and then it was $7.50 in Q3, and then it was $9 in Q4, and you have this ratio against pipeline, okay? And you strip out things about attribution or whether it came from the website or sales or anything like that. You're just looking at total marketing investment to that, right? When you add paid media dollars on top of that, likely your marketing investment was going to go up, or you cut things from other places and the marketing investment didn't change. You just changed how it was being spent.
Yeah, that makes
Then
sense.
the second part is you have marketing dollars compared to closed won new logo business. And you look at that ratio, which is a lagging metric. And then you say, we spent $1 on marketing and we got 87 cents back in Q2, and then it was 97 cents. That to me is the top level way to look at, should we keep spending this money or not? If you spent money on paid media for 2 quarters and you're not seeing a positive impact on pipeline creation and that ratio between spend and pipeline after 6 months, you have to really question whether or not the stuff is effective or not.
We are seeing pipeline increases. What I don't have yet is the closed version of that, because we only close a certain percentage of deals, and some of this stuff just came in the last month. So I'm curious to see how it evolves for us. But
I guess I just don't really understand this part about closing, because if you're a big company and you have consistent demo request flow, that there should be revenue coming through that demo form every single time. So are we caught up in, is it attribution to the ad, or like what's holding it back?
So that's what we're doing. After listening to you a couple of weeks ago, you said something about that, and we're working on that. So I'm like, hey, I need more analysis on if these things aren't closing, is there a quality issue with the stuff we are spending on? Maybe we need to turn some platforms off or do some testing, because I don't just want people at the website that submit a demo but don't actually close deals after a while. Don't actually buy the product.
Yeah,
and that's something that I've got a team of people that I'm like, can you give me some analysis of that?
Happy to talk through it with you again. I think we're going to move to Donna, but I think that Paceto could really help you all if it's something you want to talk about later. I think the way that we calculate metrics and things like that could really help.
I do have a question though from Erin. She's driving, so I'm going to ask on her behalf. But I recently listened to the events podcast episode and loved it. Would love to hear Chris talk about companies that sponsor the same event every year, but forecast and expect bigger returns every year. I find this completely delusional. Smaller niche industries tend to mostly see the same event and they're the same people year over year. Same people are coming. And is it really wise to keep sponsoring the same event for 10 plus years in a row? For example, like a regional SHRM conference. So that's like a HR regional big conference. So curious on your thoughts on that.
I mean, you tell me, Sydney, to get started, but I don't think companies forecast at that level. I don't think they're like, we're going to go and spend this much money at this event, and this is what we're going to get out of it in terms of return. And that in 2021, it was, we're going to spend 200 grand and get 500 grand out. And then the next year it's 200 grand and 700 grand out. I don't see companies forecasting at that level or return and a specific event. There's maybe a number of MQLs, maybe not like cost per meetings executed, but I don't see people forecasting at that level.
Yeah, typically they're just like cost per lead or cost per meeting booked at that. And then maybe doing some back of the napkin math, but the tracking on that is questionable at best for most of those events. But so when you say like, we're going to get more ROI out of this event this year than we did last year, I think the conversation comes back to, okay, well, what are we actually going to do that's different at the event? So like you talked about last week, or I think it was 2 weeks ago, Chris, around, okay, we are going to create content and then we're going to distribute that content. And our goal is to get X amount of views on that content, right? That's at least something else that you can do besides just relying on how many meetings booked you're going to get seeing the same amount of people.
And then at a high level on the events budget, I feel like at this point, I think it's the way that companies decide what events to go to is very just based on the opinion of like, we should be there, or our competitors are going to be there, we should go, or like our CMO thinks it's a good idea to like throw a party at this one because X, Y, and Z types of people are going to be there. And I just don't think there's enough real financial justification around the impact of these very large offline like event budgets. And that's, I think, what's happening in the economy and with marketing budgets, I think is going to put pressure on that. And people are going to have to start making choices around, instead of going to 17 events next year, maybe we're only have to go to 7. Which of the 7 are we going to go to? Why? I think that those conversations are starting to be had. there was a time where you could just boot up every single event and go there and throw a party and everybody had fun and got drunk. And you said we had some meetings. That was a good event. Like those days are over for companies that spend largely on events.
Okay, I'm going to go to, we have another question about compensation. All right, I'm going to bring Tatiana on.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I'm walking around at the moment in public, so I've got my camera off. So I've just joined a new company. It's a very fresh startup. I've only been trading for a couple of years, and I'm the director of demand generation, and basically the only marketer who's tasked with driving revenue. So I've actually started, it's my second day, but I've not actually signed the contract because we're still working out the compensation structure. I've told the owner, because he's completely new to this, he's never hired a revenue marketer before. I said, there's two ways we could do this. Any revenue which comes, which is very evidently marketing attributed, I'd get a percentage of that revenue, or a smaller percentage of the entire company performance in revenue. And I told him there's a trust issue either way. Either you trust that somebody has definitely come through marketing, or, you know, whatever it is, there's an element of faith in it, right? So this product, they sell seats for licenses on a monthly basis. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it would integrate with Salesforce. It would integrate with call center software, and live help software like Zendesk and so on. So, Chris, in your wisdom, I'd like to know what you think would be a sensible way to go around this. It's a very small team. It's 10 people. I like to work very collaboratively. I don't think marketing and sales should be hoarding contacts and saying, well, this came from me, and I can show you the exact journey where this person came in. I don't really like that, because I think we should all be collaborating. Already I've been sharing contacts with the VP of sales for the Americas and pointed her in several directions of people and companies that she should be in touch with. Would that be marketing attributed or not? I don't really want to quibble about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be interested to know your thoughts, because my boss is completely new to this. I've never worked in such a senior role at a product company. My last role was at a services business, which is very different, where the sales cycle was 18 months or more. So with this one, they can spin up a POC within hours or days. And then for the next stage of the implementation, it would take less than a week. And that's very new to me. So yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts.
Anything where you combine comp plans and attribution is not a good idea. It's the same thing as saying like companies will pay an SDR 2 times more on an outbound opportunity than an inbound opportunity. And then what happens? SDRs stop following up with inbound opportunities that are the best opportunities for the company. And the comp plan is completely misaligned with company goals. No way would I ever recommend compensating marketing on marketing attributed leads, because then all you're doing is just playing a game of attribution, not a game of how do we make the company more effective. So that one's out to me totally. When I think about this, what I would look at is, how is the sales leader, the person who owns the number, compensated? What are the triggers in their compensation plan? And then align. Maybe it's not the same. Maybe you're not getting paid the same as the sales leader. Maybe you're not getting the 60-40, so the split isn't the same. But the things that drive the variable compensation plan for this role, assuming that it's a 10-person company, that you're the only person in marketing, and the sales leader, who might have be carrying the bag or have a couple of people on their team that are doing it, and aligning the compensation structure between, it's just like aligning the CMO and the chief revenue officer compensation plans together, but on a more micro scale. Philosophically, that's what I would be looking to do.
So of the salespeople, there are only 2, and it's divided regionally, Americas and rest of the world. And then there's the owner, basically, who does some sales himself. I don't know if I should disclose this, but the EMEA APAC salesperson, or rest of the world, is actually the daughter of the owner. So
yep.
She's quite open to us focusing on the Americas, because that's a real we're lagging on sales to America, and we have the America's salesperson actually is based in America. It's just, it's not some English person faking an American accent. But she's not fussed either way, because eventually everything will come to her when the time comes. I think is a nice way to put it. There's no VP of sales or chief revenue officer. It's the owner, and then split regionally between two people. Very, very small company, very, very, and the end goal is to exit as quickly as to grow as fast as possible and exit as quickly as possible to whomever,
Yeah. I think at a philosophical level, aligning your compensation to business goals and sales goals is like, I don't want to go through the nuances because it's very dependent. I appreciate you saying that there's no chief revenue officer and there's two salespeople and they're divided, because that changes the discussion. But I think the first principle is aligning your work to company goals, not related to attribution or MQLs or things like that, like really focused on what is the company trying to do, and making sure that in your role, the variable compensation should be a bonus, not a part of base compensation. And be very clear on that. Like, if the company delivers on these goals, then I get paid this extra amount on top of my base compensation, not if the company doesn't hit this goal, then I only make 80% of my base compensation, because you don't have control over a person actually selling the deal. To me, those are some of the things that I would think about. I would also encourage, like, you can do it if you want, but like, if it was my compensation, I would not want to have my compensation be based on the performance of a market that's lagging. I want my performance to be either based on overall or a market that's going, where I can pour gasoline on it and make it work even better and get a higher bonus. So like, companies used to do that with us with Refine Labs, and they would be like, oh, like, our revenue in Australia is trailing behind. We want to hire you to focus on Australia revenue, which is like 3% of their business, while they do 60% of revenue in North America, and it's actually working. And it's like, pour gasoline on the shit that actually works, not spend your time and effort trying to fix a market that's lagging and not working. It's different in your situation. You need to get North America to work. But just as a note, like a more broad note, I think that I would personally want my compensation to be based either on overall company performance, or at least not stuck in a market that's lagging behind plan, or it just puts you at a disadvantage.
So I should just say, the discussions we've had so far are actually around giving me a percentage of the sales. Like, as if we sell 10,000 seats on a 1-year contract to whomever, I would get a percentage of the revenue from that deal. So it's almost like a sales commission, which I think is quite healthy. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Sounds great for you, but it'll break as the company grows. As you have more reps and more roles and more marketers, that compensation model will break. So
right.
You want to take advantage of it for right now, but like by 15, 20 people, it'll have to go away.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks very much. I know there are other people who want to ask questions as well. So thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, happy to help. And also, Donna, maybe 4 times a charm, but we have a hard stop at 1:00 in the studio today. So maybe we should hit you back to be the first guest on the next episode. Appreciate you being here. I'm going to wrap it up right here. Thank you all for the discussion. It's something that I've been thinking about, is like trying to show the spend in the way that we look at it at Paceto, and some of those dynamics people can start to replicate. That I think is pretty interesting. Just another last word of caution on the spend survey, or the go-to-market survey, and the CAC payback survey, and those types of things. Like, pretty much everything out there that I've seen does not match anywhere close to what we're seeing when we analyze financial data and CRM data together in an objective way. And so I'm just cautioning people on where you get that information and how influential it is in the decisions that you make. Just be cautious. And so with all that said, we won't be back. For those of you that joined a little bit late, we're taking off Tuesday the 25th and July 2nd, and we'll be back here on July 9th. So I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. See you soon, everyone. Bye.